Welcome to the Elk Talk Podcast with Randy Newberg and Corey Jacobson. Presented by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation.
The goal is, what little you and I know about elk hunting, we share with people.
I've got an elk building. It's like 120 yards away. What do I do? First off, the thought would never cross my mind when an elk's being 120 yards away to call anybody on a cell phone.
All elk?
All the time? Only elk?
Only elk.
Well, it's us having conversations, so we usually go down some rabbit holes, but
If you hunt with Corey Jacobson, you will find the landscape is full of rabbit holes. We're just going to make this up as we go.
and you look at it like, oh, that's a target-rich environment. But if you're trying to single one out, a solo target there is much easier to go into than a big group.
We record everything, so there's no BSing, no lying, no faking it with us.
Did we hit the record
I
button?
thought I forgot to hit the record button. If you want to know something about elk hunting, this probably isn't the podcast to listen to. Should we give them a list of all the other podcasts where they might learn something? The Elk Talk Podcast is brought to you by the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation, ensuring the future of elk, other wildlife, their habitat, and our hunting heritage. To become a member, go to rmef.org.
The Elk Talk Podcast is also brought to you by Mountain Ops, making outdoor energy and performance nutrition to make you a stronger and healthier elk hunter. They have a full line of hunting-related supplements, including meal replacement shakes, multivitamins, pre-workout fuel, and post-workout recovery. And my favorite, their new performance protein bars that, by the way, are packed with 270 calories and 20 grams of protein, but contain less than 6 grams of sugar. Visit mountainops.com to learn more and to order, and be sure to use the promo code ELKTALK to save on your next order.
The podcast is also brought to you by Gerber. Go to gerbergear.com and learn about the knives, the Vital, the Big Game Vital, the Gator Premium, all the things that we use when we're out in the woods, and not just knives, but also some really cool multi-tools that they have.
And we have a promo code for Gerber as well. Just use the code ELKTALK to save 20% on your orders at gerbergear.com. And we are also brought to you by Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls. And Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls is the original designer and inventor of the pallet plate diaphragm that's completely changed the way elk calls are made and used. And to find out more and to order your elk calls, go to RockyMountainHuntingCalls.com or BuglingBull.com and use promo code ELKTALK, and you're going to save 15% on all of your elk calls and elk call accessories.
The Elk Talk Podcast is also brought to you by GoHunt.com. Go to GoHunt.com and sign up for the Insider. The Insider is changing how hunts and hunting information are found. No doubt about that. Use promo code ELKTALK, and when you sign up for the Insider, you're going to get $50 of store credit, mad money, in their gear shop.
Lastly, the University of Elk Hunting online course is a proud partner of the Elk Talk Podcast. And within the University of Elk Hunting online course, you're going to find nearly 60 chapters organized in 17 modules of elk hunting instruction aimed at making you a more successful elk hunter. From planning and e-scouting to calling strategies and packing, every imaginable elk hunting topic is included in the online course. And regardless of your previous elk hunting experience or success, I'm confident the University of Elk Hunting online course will make you a more confident, more successful elk hunter. Just visit elk101.com and use the promo code ELKTALK to save 20% when you sign up for a membership to the University of Elk Hunting online course.
And with that, Corey, we are ready to get into it.
Let's jump into it.
Corey, how hot is it this afternoon in Idaho?
Well, it depends what part of Idaho you're in, but the part I'm in is plenty hot, even though it's probably one of the cooler places in Idaho. But
Oh, really?
we're in the low 90s, so for 5,000 feet in elevation, it feels plenty hot. But I'm not complaining because we aren't 105 or 106 like it is in Boise. So
Well, they deserve that weather down there, you know.
they do.
That's what my dad used to say about, we live just northwest of Duluth and people complain about the terrible weather in Duluth. He'd say, those people deserve that weather. So, I don't know what he meant by that, but it's something I picked up. So, I think those Boise people, they deserve that kind of weather.
That's right, for whatever reason.
Yeah. If they all want to congregate in some little confine like that, more power to them. Well, if I read the newspaper correctly, half of them are from California, moved there in the last 2 years. So this probably isn't hot weather to them if they all came from California.
Exactly. Yeah, they're probably bringing the hot weather with them.
Yeah. There you go. Now you blame, in the West, folks, I'm sure anyone listening who is from the West is going to nod their head and laugh, but it's absolute fair game to blame everything that is wrong. The weather, hunting pressure, viruses, you name it, on Californians and non-residents.
That's right. And if they happen to be Californians in
They
any
are
of the other, I was going to say, in any state other than California, then they're non-residents. So
yeah. So, well, here in Bozeman, it's not that bad. It's 82 degrees today.
Oh, man.
I know. I hate it when the weather is just beautiful in Bozeman because we already got too many people here. You go out to the river to fish, you got to bring your own rock to stand on anymore.
Man.
It's like, geez.
Who's to blame for that? Californians?
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I would say that, but there's an awful lot of Colorado, Washington, and Minnesota plates here.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of Washington plates in Idaho, too. A lot of people from Washington moving over here.
Huh.
Yeah. And just to clarify, we love people from California. It's just
we're joking.
Inside joke of got to blame it on somebody. So let's pick on the Californians.
Yeah, they're like this intangible kind of problematic fog that everybody just says, well, blame it on them. Kind of like my uncles, they blame everything on Obamacare, It'll
and
be 100
like you blame everything on the cameraman.
There you go. So there's just certain things that's just how it goes. I don't know if we even want to dive into this, but I'm going to because it kind of gets me to this discussion of people moving to the West, especially the Intermountain West. Right now in Wyoming, there's a task force that's talking about moving their draws from, it depends on the species, but they're really generous right now. They give anywhere from 16% of the limited entry elk tags to, I think, 25% of the moose, goat, sheep, and bison tags, and even a higher number of the antelope and deer tags. And they have a council of citizens and legislators right now that are looking at cranking that down like every other state is and go to 90% for residents, 10% for non-residents. And I see it in other states. I see it in my home state of Montana when people complain about the non-resident fees for not, compared to what we pay, or this discussion going on in Wyoming. And very often the answer residents is, well, if you don't like it, move here then. That's how you get cheaper tags. That's how you aren't discriminated against from a percentage tag. Well, I'm telling those guys, why don't you just shut up, man? A lot of people are taking you up on that offer.
Tell them you agree with them. Yeah, it's a bad thing. I certainly wouldn't vote for it, but man, that's too bad.
So anyhow, you better be careful, folks, when you're saying, well, just move here then.
Yeah, because they're coming in droves, it seems like right now.
Yeah, Montana, we're getting a second. We've had one congressional district for a long time. Our population has grown so much, we're getting a second congressional district, which that's a whole different story in itself, but it's an indicator of how Montana is growing faster than the national average because we stole a congressional seat from some state. I don't know who, but and everywhere I travel to the quote unquote wonderful hunting locations of the West, it's the same thing. It's like, where are all these people coming from?
Yeah. And who's buying their houses? I mean, they're selling houses and moving here and buying houses and building houses, but I mean, where's the population coming from? Is there a boat from somewhere overseas that just arrived and people are filling up all those houses that are being sold, or what?
I don't know, but anyhow, that is, if you've ever spent a camp with Randy Newberg, asking how the weather is how you get into politics and Obamacare and I'm sorry. You remember when we were a kid and our parents bought us those little things? What are they called? Kaleidoscopes. That it starts out where it looks like one thing, and as you turn it, it just becomes this whole fractured view of all kinds of colorful stuff. That's kind of me when you ask me a simple question.
A fractured view of colorful stuff. That is Randy in a nutshell right there.
Well, which one of these listener questions do we want to cover today? Any of them, or do we just want to jump into our own ideas?
Yeah, we've got some good stuff. I say we jump into our own ideas, and then if we run short on colorful commentary on fragmented ideas, then we can come back to the list here.
I'm sorry, man. It's a Monday. No, it's a Tuesday afternoon. What do you expect from me, right? My brain is fried from walleye fishing. It was so hot. It was too hot to fish. There's a country music song that says "too hot to fish" or whatever.
Too hot for golf, too hot to fish, too cold at home.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about the too cold at home thing, but I don't play golf. But this is the first time ever in my life it was too hot to fish. I went to Fort Peck, and I would have swore I was in Saudi Arabia or something. There's a mirage everywhere. It's like, I drove this far for that. Man. I'm getting the heck out of here.
Did you catch any walleye?
Yeah, we caught a few. We caught more pike at Fort Peck than we did walleye. If anyone's a pike fisherman, would you go to Fort Peck and clean out some of those 10, 12-pound pike? They're like flies up there.
Wow.
Yeah, they break your line. Toothy buggers just ping. It's like, well, they're running $8 crankbait. And it's like, man, where'd they all come from? Well, so we caught some walleyes, and then we went out locally yesterday and caught 8 walleyes. So had walleyes for dinner last night. My wife informed me I'm cooking walleyes for dinner again tonight. So.
Wow.
So anyhow,
I was excited about your cooler of dilly bars you're bringing to Big Sky.
Oh yeah, if you're going to be in Big Sky for the Total Archery Challenge, thanks to Leupold and RMEF, I've got 500 dilly bars coming. I called down there. I'm like, I want to talk to Karen. They're like, well, she sold the joint last winter. I'm like, what? This is the third time now that someone sold that place on me, and I keep trying to buy it. And they got rid of the old manager, Salmon. He used to look forward to me coming and buying a couple hundred dilly bars. I said, I'm going to really double down this time. I'm buying 500.
Ooh.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, I know where I'll be hanging out.
Yeah, bringing a whole freezer up there.
Do you have to be a kid to get one?
You got to be a kid, or you got to sign up to be a member of the Elk Foundation, or show me your RMEF membership card.
Oh, I'll bring my life membership plaque, and I'll just sit there and eat dilly bars all day.
But all this hot weather had, you and I were in Ogden, what was it, 2 weeks ago, a week ago? I can't remember.
Just a little over a week.
Yeah. And a lot of people were asking questions. We were all doing our own little breakout sessions. A lot of them were asking me questions about dry years and fires and, do elk behave differently because of a year like we're having right now? And it's been the hottest year since in the 30 years I've lived in Montana. It's been the hottest year by a mile. I don't know if it's been that way in Idaho.
Yeah.
What Portland, Oregon have like 115 degrees?
Did it really?
A week or so ago. Whew.
Wow. Isaac was up in Lewiston, Idaho, looking at the college up there last week, and it was 117 there the day he was there.
Oh my gosh.
But Liston's been, historically, I think it had the hot spot in the state of Idaho from back in the 60s or something at like 121 degrees or some crazy thing. So it's, the elevation there is not much above sea level, and it gets hot there. But Portland doesn't see 115 degrees.
No. If any place deserves it, they do, I guess.
That's right. Maybe everybody there will move to Bozeman.
And I can say that my son lives there, so I can heckle Portlanders. But is it changing how you're approaching this season?
It's not really. Our first hunt is going to. Have I let the cat out of the bag yet on where we're going?
I have no idea if you have or haven't. All you've done is told me, hey, I need a camera guy here. I need a camera guy here. So folks who don't know, I promised Corey that I'd provide all the camera guys he needed for this season for Destination Elk. That was a big mistake on my part.
Big mistake. I was just talking to cameraman John, about that about a half hour ago. I said, Randy added up the man days that he was committed to for camera guys for this project, and I'm going to have to beg for forgiveness for a long time.
It's going to cost. I'm not sure what it's going to cost, but it'll be a lot. But so because of that, I have to leave. I got to hunt the first week of season in Montana. Man. I never hunt elk the first week of season in Montana, but it's the only time I have a camera guy. I got 12 people who work here, and the only time I can find a camera guy that isn't with you is the first week of elk season.
I would feel sorry for you if you didn't have a moose tag and a goat tag in your home state of Montana, and maybe that had a little bit of influence of when you were hunting. But
you always rat me out. So it is changing my my ideas of what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And when I was driving through central Montana, spoiler alert, can we tell people I'm going to be hunting central Montana?
It's up to you. That's your spot. I would never tell them where you're hunting, but.
Well, I'm pretty sure they're going to look around and say he's not around Bozeman. So anyhow, I'll be hunting in central Montana, and it is as dry and brown as I've ever seen it there at the end of June. I mean, I went snooping around, and places that used to have lots and lots of water have no water. Wow. Anything that isn't down in some draw or gully that runs east, northeast, north, or northwest is just torched right now. So it's changing what I had for a plan.
Yeah, feed sources, it sounds like, are drying up. Water is critical, and if there's no water, but even in places where there's water, there might not be a nutritional feed source.
So. That's the thing I'm seeing, is that there's still water in some of the creeks that run around, and little springs here and there, but the forage is way, way different. There are places that are so torched off that normally you'd see grass up to your knees still. It's just brown. It's like, the locusts show up here? What the heck? Yeah. So I know in those big places where occasionally or frequently I'd see elk in September, I don't know that I'm going to see any elk there in September, because the cows are going to be where the forage is. And in a dry year like this, the forage isn't in some of those places it used to be. So
if I didn't know you better, I'd think you were kind of setting up excuses for why you didn't fill your elk tag already.
Absolutely. That's always the case, Corey. When I drew the tag, the first thing when I applied for it, I'm like, I wonder how many excuses are there available for this tag. So,
believe me, I've got my list already too. So
yeah, it is changing what I'm going to do. But you kind of headed me down that path by saying, "Can we tell the audience?"
Yeah,
that's up to you.
Yeah, I don't remember if we have told them or not, and they'll find out eventually. But maybe we'll just tell them here, and if somebody
Okay.
repeats it, we'll know that they've heard it on the Elk Talk podcast and nowhere else. So we'll at least know where the rumor started. But
Okay.
we decided to change things up a little this year. And with it, obviously we're changing the format of Destination Elk. And we thought, if we're going to call it Destination Elk, let's go to an elk destination. And it might not be a destination people would think of when they think of elk. So unfortunately, I didn't draw a Pennsylvania elk tag yet. If I do, it might change our plans again. But Donnie and I are planning on hunting Roosevelt elk again this year. And while that might not come as a surprise, we're planning on doing it in Alaska. So
You're crazy.
I agree. It's probably one of the, if not the toughest elk hunt. Success-wise, terrain-wise, weather condition-wise, transportation-wise, everything about it is
Logistics, weather.
Yeah, we looked. I mean, I'm going to end up buying 8 of those little power banks to take with us so that we can charge batteries, because we will not for 10 days have any access to anything with electricity, cell coverage, motors, anything. It'll be camp on back and great big backpacks and hiking to find elk.
And great big bears that are brown colored with their claws are about as long as my fingers.
Yep.
And they're
Brown
hungry
bears.
that time of year.
More wolves than elk. Yeah, so it'll be an adventure.
I bet you where you're going, there's as many brown bears as there are bull elk.
Yeah. Oh, I guarantee there might be as many brown bears as there are elk. There's just not a high population of elk there. But
so can I buy a life insurance policy on you guys before you go?
No need to. Maybe for the camera guy, but
you notice how I said when I volunteered all my camera guys for this September?
Yeah.
I told you except for that hunt.
You did, yeah. Poor cameraman John, he got roped into that one too. So
yeah. So well, that'll be exciting.
It will. So we're not. I mean, honestly, there may still even be glacial snow in the high country there. We certainly aren't worrying about a drought there. But when we come back to Idaho, we're going to hunt a new area in Idaho that we've never been to before. So
oh, really?
Yeah, I decided to mix it up here too, and thought, you know what, if we're not going to fill an elk tag, we might as well have excuses like I've never been there before. And
yeah, well, I've been to this spot I'm going to before, but I haven't hunted it with my bow since 2011. Because I've always been busy doing something else. And I finally said, when you called me and said, hey, would you guys help out with this? I'm like, yep, but I'm going to do this because this is what I want to do.
Yep.
So I am.
Yeah, I've never even stepped foot or driven through the area that we're going to go to. And I actually just, as we're talking here, just got a text from Mr. Bo Beatty saying he's got llamas I can use that week, and let him know how many. So
wow,
the plan's coming together.
Well, I told him I was going to take llamas also, but maybe I'm not.
That's I mean, it adds an element when there's no feed and no water.
Yeah, and normally I would have done it in a heartbeat.
Yeah,
because it's such a cool place to go. But I don't know if I am because I don't know where I'd water them.
Yep.
So I'll make that decision before the time comes.
That's right. Now we're going to actually do a little scouting either on our way to or our way from Big Sky next weekend, and put foot in there at least and see what the water situation's looking like.
Yeah. Well, for me, back to some of the questions that we got in Ogden, people were asking me, how does it affect my planning? The first thing I always say is, are they migratory elk or non-migratory elk? And when you get out in central and eastern Montana, these aren't real migratory elk. So they're looking for food sources that they can depend upon, and they move to different food sources with great regularity. Well, central and eastern Montana is a super forage abundant location most years. So you got elk dispersed equally across the landscape. Well, I can tell you right now that they are not going to be dispersed equally across the landscape this year.
Yeah.
There's just too many places without much to eat. The good part about that is that means I can eliminate an awful lot of the unit. But the bad part of that is so will most of the other hunters.
Yeah.
So Montana, who never adjusts their tag numbers up or down, gives the same number of tags no matter what. We're all going to be crammed into these pockets where we know there's good forage. Because there are pockets of good forage even in a really hot, dry year. But I expect a lot of company.
Yep.
A lot of company. So.
Yeah, it definitely concentrates the elk, but then that concentrates the hunters, and then that disperses the elk, and it's just a game there that, that's what I'm looking at now. I've been doing a bunch of e-scouting and trying to get a feel for where the pockets of timber are going to be, if it continues hot and dry, where the water is going to be most likely to stay, the last places where it will go, but then also looking at it saying, hey, if we have llamas, let's take advantage of that, because there's a lot of people that they're going to be forced to hunt within 4 or 5 miles of a road, and if we can find water back in 6 or 7 miles and go back there and camp, it's just going to, the elk will still be concentrated. There just won't be as much pressure from other hunters, hopefully.
Yeah, and this will be an interesting year to use the tactic we use with llamas. Is llamas don't need hardly any water at all, whereas horses do.
Yeah.
So we hunt places with llamas where we think there's enough water for llamas, but not enough for horses.
Yeah.
So in doing that, we hardly ever run into horse hunters. So I don't know if that'll change this year as the water, the average water levels or moisture or water availability maybe is the term, if that changes. So, but when we were down there doing that thing in Ogden, you were given serious calling instructions. You had everybody in your breakout session playing the flute pretty well in a short order of time.
Yeah.
How'd you pull that
and
off?
maybe just backing up a little bit, because people might be confused why we were in Ogden or where Ogden even is. But Randy and I participated last weekend in Mountain Ops put on an event called the Elk Summit. And it was their first annual. They've already actually got a schedule in place for next year, so it'll happen again. But it was a really cool event. And to be able to be a part of it, it just reiterated to me how serious some people are about elk hunting, and there were people, they paid a good deal of money. I think it was $1,750 to attend. And on top of that, I think almost every state in the United States was represented there. You had Florida and Kentucky and Virginia and Michigan and Illinois and Ohio, and there was
Alabama. You taught the Alabama guys. You taught them so well. They won the calling contest.
I know.
Last
How
night.
often does that happen? Somebody from Alabama wins a calling contest, but they were good. But no, it was fun. My breakout portion was on elk calling, and having a group, of say 100 people, breaking it into 5 groups. There were never more than 20 people, and in fact, some of the groups only had 12 or 13 people. So it gave me a chance. Everybody there got elk calls, and typically when you're doing a seminar, you can't be instructing people. You can't even let them take the calls out of the package, because it just turns into chaos and you lose control really quickly. But we were able to put it in. And I went around one-on-one with each person, making sure they could make a sound first, and then took them to the next step of learning to control the sound. And it was amazing. Some of these people that had never even had a diaphragm elk call in their mouth before were sounding good enough in that 2-hour period to be able to confidently go out and call elk. So that was fun. The ones we struggled with the most, there was one guy that had such bad gag reflex, he can't even brush his teeth hardly. And as soon as he said that, I thought, well, there's no hope for you. So he wasn't able to participate, because he tried putting the diaphragm in a couple times, and before it even got on his tongue, he was gagging and spitting it out.
Wow.
But beyond that, the guys that struggled the most were turkey hunters. And you would think,
really, why is that?
Well, it's
Yeah.
blowing an elk diaphragm is completely opposite from blowing a turkey diaphragm. And the way I teach people to use the diaphragm is, when you hear an elk bugle and you try to replicate that sound, you throw the diaphragm in, and the first thing you're going to do is you want to get to that high note. And
Mhm.
you figure you just have to blow harder because, you think of the concept when you take a blade of grass, you pull on both ends of it and blow across it. The vibration from your air blowing across it is what creates that sound.
Mhm.
And as you pull tighter on that blade of grass, it changes the pitch and it goes to the higher notes. If you blow hard, you keep the blade of grass the same tension and just blow hard across it, it's just going to blow out and you're going to lose the sound. You're going to have no control over it at all. But that's what a lot of people do when they use an elk diaphragm is they put it in and they try to change the pitch with air pressure and airflow.
Mhm.
And so I taught all of them, from the beginning, I want you to use your tongue, very little air pressure, use tongue pressure to change that pitch. And the turkey guys, when you're making a turkey sound with the diaphragm, you're hitting it with hard and short bursts of air to make the hen cluck. And your tongue is really not having a lot of control over it. It's just going up and slapping against the latex, and then you're forcing a whole bunch of air across it. So for elk calling, they had to completely change their mindset on how to make sounds. And then the other thing is we would start to do the growl, that growl down in your
Mhm.
throat where you get that real deep resonating, just bass sound out of that bugle at the beginning and the end. And they wanted to roll their tongue like they do when they're turkey calling. And so they would sit there and roll their tongue as they're hitting the latex. And you could tell that they were rolling their tongue and putting a lot of air pressure into it. So we had to really
Hmm.
work to break them of those habits to get them. And they were great turkey callers, but they just had the wrong
Hmm.
instruction for using an elk call.
Well, I'm I'm not a turkey hunter, so I don't have that developed bad habit as an excuse for my bad elk calling. So,
Well, I wanted to come and sit in your class. Eric Chesser was there from Hushin, and
Mhm.
Brian Call from Gritty, and Ryan Carter
Carter.
from, yeah, he's probably one of the top guys for finding big bulls. And he just spends so much time and effort finding that. But I wanted to sit in on everybody else's session because with that group of guys there were certainly things
Yeah.
that we could learn even after 35 years of elk hunting. Those guys have the same kind of experience, but we didn't get to do that. So,
No, no, I was amazed at how diverse the audience was. And I did like how small the groups were
yeah,
because you get a big group and uh, you get pretty generic questions that I don't know if each person gets a lot out of it. Whereas you get these smaller groups, and the first thing I did was ask them, where you're from. Are you primarily a rifle hunter or primarily an archery hunter? And then I had kind of the path we would follow based on how they answered that.
yeah,
And I hope they got a lot out of it. It was a lot of fun, and for me to always get better at communicating what I do or how I do it is, what do they say? If you want to become a better student, try to be a teacher.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so and you really got to think all this through and give it the, what would I say, the perspective of how do you really say what you're trying to say. In other words, make it as digestible as you possibly can. And
Yeah.
that always helps me when I force myself to do that.
Well, and I
And
look at, someone like yourself, and there are a lot of people that have as much elk hunting experience and success as you and I do. Uh, I think the difference is being able to first off even understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. Because for a long time I didn't. I mean, I
yeah,
was successful
well,
before I knew why I was successful for sure. But then being able to make it relatable and understandable to someone who doesn't have maybe any experience, it's hard to do. And it took me a long time to to get to where I felt like, okay, I'm saying it in a way that somebody else is going to be able to understand and have an aha, that makes sense to me. Because there's a big difference between being a successful elk hunter and teaching successful elk hunting. And what you said there was, if you want to be a great teacher, you got to be a great student, and vice versa. If you want to be a great student, you've got to look at a good teacher. But it's so important to approach it from that perspective of having no experience, but then to be able to put your experiences into it. It's really hard to sometimes separate the two. And that's one of the things that I think I've always looked up to in you, is your ability to take 40 years of hunting, or however many 70 years of hunting, or whatever it is you have, and make it relatable to people that have never even dreamed of hunting before, and make it understandable so that they can feel confident in their knowledge that they have to be able to go and do it for the first time.
Well, the wonderful part about having 70 years of failure tied up in 40 years of hunting is you got an awful lot of mistakes that you can tell people, don't do this,
Exactly.
don't do that. And one of the topics we got into was with migratory elk, how migratory elk will use their transition range during a dry year like this. And, you saw me up there on my butcher paper on my easel. I must think I'm an artist or something. I draw these little stick men and these really bad diagrams, but I enjoy it. It helps me teach better. Maybe in my other life, I felt like John Madden was onto something when he used to have his little telestrator when he first started doing that on football games.
Yep.
But when I do that and I talk about transition ranges, I try to make it as simple as possible. Transition ranges are where the hunting happens. Very seldom are we hunting this high summer range, and very seldom are we hunting the low winter range. So all of a sudden we've got maybe 30% of the unit crossed off, where there might be some elk there, but the densities are going to be super low.
Yep.
So let's focus on these other areas. Well, once you start focusing on those other areas and you have a really warm, dry year like this, you're going to want to look higher and higher, because those are the places that still have the best quality forage. It may not be the high quality it would have been in a really wet year, but relative to the entire transition range, you're going to find the best forage probably up higher, depending on where you're at. I'd say in most migratory herds, that's the case. So if you can focus on the top third of the transition range, now you just got rid of 2/3 of the other 70%.
Yep.
All of a sudden, where you got to go and look to find these elk gets to be a lot smaller and a lot smaller. So
yeah, and to add to that, and I think you're exactly right. That's kind of my philosophy for this season as well, that the elk are probably going to be up a little higher, getting out of the heat for one thing. The better feed is going to be up there, but even taking it back a step, talking about that transition range, the bulls have their high elevation summer range. And then most of the elk are concentrated, at least relatively close, in their lower elevation winter range. And the rut happens typically somewhere in between that. And, I've always looked at it as, where are the calf elk born? And usually the cows, once the feed starts becoming available outside of the winter range, they start moving up in elevation and usually don't make it up as high as the bulls go. But they make it up higher than where the winter range is, for sure. They've got good feed there. They've got good cover, so the calves are protected when they're born. But then usually they don't vary or range too far from where that area is. They aren't going to move too much from where the calves are born to where the bulls come and find them in that transition spot in between the winter and summer range. But one other factor I look at is, what was the spring weather like? As far as when did that feed start greening up out of the winter range? How hard of a spring, as far as snowfall and things, did we have? Was there still snow up in the high country that would hold the cows down a little lower than where they wanted to go? And this year, all of the factors are pointing to elk being a little higher in elevation, and that aligns perfectly with most of the places had a lighter winter, with snow melting a little bit faster and elk moving up into higher elevations a little sooner. And I think we're going to see that some of the calves were born a little higher than where they might usually have been, coupled with the lack of feed and water at those lower elevations. I would say the exact same thing. Look a little higher than where you might have found them last year or where you might think they're going to be this year.
Yeah. And so when I ask for a poll of people, hey, are you archery or rifle? What's your interest? And when they say, like one group, only one of the 10 or 12 people said they rifle hunt. All the rest archery hunt. So I said, all right, I'll save a few questions for rifle hunting, but in archery season, we're going to cover the first 3 periods: the early season of August, the pre-rut, and the peak rut. And those are mostly the periods when we're archery hunting. So I got to saying, all right, just like you explained earlier, that the bulls, they summer in their bachelor groups up really high. In August 10th, plus minus whenever, through the 20th, they rub the velvet. And within not too long, those bachelor groups disperse and become solo bulls going down near where the cows are. And as quick as those bulls disperse and head towards the cow, to me, that's the triggering date of where we went from early season to pre-rut.
Yep.
And you got these, a lot of times you'll have the younger bulls, the 2 and 3 year olds, who are in there thinking, oh boy, look at me. What my lucky day. But that comes to an end within, a week or 10 days. And once those younger bulls start getting displaced by the older bulls, that's when we switch, in my mind, from the pre-rut to the peak rut. And people always try to say, well, what day is that? Well, it's never a day on the calendar. It's not like every bull elk wakes up on September 10th and says, well, the calendar says it's peak rut today. Let's all behave differently. It it changes by latitude, by elevation, by so many things that it's plus or minus a couple days here or there. And so I try to paint the picture that when you're hunting the pre-rut and the peak rut, to some degree, you are almost hunting a food pattern, because the cows are looking for the best food year round. So they're going to go to, where are these places we normally have this rutting activity, and where is the best food? And to the human eye, it all looks green up there on that northeast facing slope. Well, guess what? The cow elk, she knows which little corner of which drainage has the best forage for that 2-day period. And I try to, this is what, so how I said I got to make this simple? So my wife has me help her plant her flowers every spring and summer. I get so frustrated because why can't we just plant them in mid-May and they're good for the year? Well, some of them peak at this time and some of them peak in June. And I don't understand the calendar she's got there of which ones happen when. But in my mind, I'm thinking this is why cow elk are moving from this little drainage, moving 3/4 mile and staying there for 5 days. And then they move 4 miles and they stay there for 5 or 6 days. Because the primary forage, the premium absolute best forage they're seeking, doesn't stay present all summer long. They have to, a cow elk has to get the absolute best amount of nutrition for whatever energy she expends. She can't waste this. She can't be inefficient. So she is dialed into the fact that, the last week of June, up on this high end of this transition range or summer range, this plant in this forb was the absolute premium nutritional peak. But as these plants dry out or other ones succeed them in being even more nutritious, these cow elk are moving all over the place finding that best forage on that day. And so the point of all that is, don't let the human eye be the judge of what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Let them tell you what they're looking for.
Yep.
So that was going into that. I was getting some puzzled looks by people like, I'm not sure I follow this. And then when I used the analogy of my wife saying, well, at this elevation, this plant is really good the first half of June. So the front of the house is going to look kind of yellow then. But then when those die out, I want you to put these purple and orange ones out there. Those do better when it gets hot in July. Well, that's kind of, I hate to say it, but that's kind of what a cow elk has to do. She has to move around to find whatever plant is the best forage for her at that time. And that's what they do. They don't randomly just say, "Oh, I think I'm going to stroll around out here." They don't do anything by accident or without purpose and intent.
Yep.
They don't have the luxuries we do.
And efficiency. They aren't going to waste a whole bunch of time and energy to do what they know they need to do. They're going to go to where they need the food. They're going to find the food. And as soon as that food's gone, they aren't waiting around there. They're going to go and find the next best place. And
if you want to read some good reports on this, the Starkey Experimental Forest has done all this, and they have their own elk herd there that is accustomed to people. But these aren't genetically changed or bred for this characteristic. This is a wild herd of elk in an enclosure, but they're so accustomed to people that the scientists can walk along every day and say, oh, today they're eating this or they ate that. They watch the plant that the elk eats.
Yep.
And I'm not saying that what they're eating in Oregon will apply to what they're eating in New Mexico or Montana. But when you read that, you will realize how much variety a cow elk has in its diet and how selective it is every day of, oh, I'm looking for this. I'll walk by other stuff that's so, but I want this. Because this week, this forb or this really nutritional thing has bloomed, and I'm looking for those. And they see it in their observations. They see it in the fecal samples that they take. It's just incredible. I don't know. Maybe I'm too much of a nerd, Corey, but I read that stuff and I'm like, why didn't I discover that? This should be like the first thing you have to read before they even sell you an elk hunting license.
No, don't do that, because it'll make people that much better of an elk hunter. Like there's some good information in the Starkey experiment. I mean, they look at cow-calf survival rates. They look at which bulls are doing the breeding. And I think, I hear people, the elk rut's getting earlier and earlier every year. We went out opening weekend, the elk were screaming, and by the third week they were done. The bulls were away from the cows. And you look at, the amount of time that a cow is pregnant doesn't change. It's, it's like a human.
Gestation period is the same.
Yeah, it might vary from 5 days, plus or minus 5 days from cow to cow. But overall, I think the average is 242 to 245 days, something like that. So we're looking right at 8 months plus 5 days. And if you see a brand new calf elk on June 1st, within a day or two that cow was bred on September 29th. And I would say within 5 days of that cow being bred, that's when the peak rut really kicked in and started. So, it ties in almost perfectly. You look at when the calves are born, you do the math backwards on that for a gestation period, and then you look at the fall equinox, and I would bet, 9 times out of 10, you're within that peak rut is kicking off within 3 or 4 days of that fall equinox.
Mm-hmm.
So this year, I think it's September 21st, 22nd, somewhere in there.
Yep.
I would say most of the cows are being bred that September 26th through October 3rd, 4th time frame. And again, like you said, it varies by latitude, by area. It depends on feed. It depends on the herd demographics, the bull to cow ratios, all of those things. But in a nutshell, we're looking at that last week of September is usually the peak rut. And there's not a lot that can be argued about when the calves are born, and they're born at that time for a reason. It's that's when the highest rate of survival is going to be for them. It's before the heat of the summer. There's ample feed. There's plenty of forage for them to hide from predators until they're big enough to escape on their own. I mean, all these things, you look at the factors that go into it, and these elk are born at a very specific time, which correlates to the cows being bred at a very specific time.
Yeah, and it reiterates. I mean, you start talking about all that, and when you were getting into the part about they got to be dropped on the landscape at this time because there's more forage to hide from predators, and the nutritional plane for the cows is at a peak. It just reiterates none of this is happening randomly or by accident. The cow who decided that she wasn't going to go into, estrus until November, or the one who said, yeah, I'm going to go into estrus in July, guess what? All of her calves died. And that trait didn't get carried on.
Yep.
That bad idea got eliminated.
She's wandering around on her winter range looking for a bull in July, and they got weeded out pretty quickly.
Yeah. So, did you get a lot of people asking you questions about how to call elk in hot temperatures and full moon? Did you get many of those questions?
Yep. And, again, that comes back to, I think the moon plays a little bit of a role in when they're bred, which affects a little bit when the calves are born and all that. But yeah, we had a lot of questions. How do you call elk in smoke? How do you call elk when it's hot? How do you call elk when there's a full